Once again, welcome back to the webinar for those of you who have been joining us in our series of brain-based webinars. And for those who are new to us, welcome to BrainFit. Very quick introduction before we start. And today or tonight, we will be talking about a very common complaint, people, adults thinking that, learners are lazy, right? And even, adults ourselves, thinking that we probably could do with some help ourselves. So let's examine that a little bit closer for this session. But before that, again, a quick introduction. If you are just dialing in, I am supported by a team of wonderful panelists. These are all BrainFit coaches and people we've been working together with for years, right? And if you want to know more about them, you can find the information about them on our website, and they will be assisting with questions. So do put any questions on the Q&A section, and then we'll try and address them as quickly as we can. And we do have Thai interpretation, so please select the channel for Thai if you require that. And a quick introduction about myself. My name is Cheryl. I'm trained as a physical therapist. And I've started, I work with the brain for many years now, because my very, very first posting was actually into the ICU of a children's hospital. So part of my job was really looking at the neurological development of the infants. And of course, I'm a mom as well. And so I have a real life experience of nurturing two young brains. I've also written a book on the topic. BrainFit is an entity that I started close to 20 years ago, and we're interested in looking at neuroscience discoveries and translating them into practical programs, activities, exercises that can be used to improve brain performance and improve lives. So we have learning centers and partner schools that we work with over these different countries. Here you can see some of our centers. And so we offer enrichment programs from babies as young as 9 months to adults and also seniors. And in some locations, we also run preschools. So here you can see some of our different centers. So these are some of our partners, some awards that we have won. And let's get into the topic for today or tonight, depending on where you're from. So like I mentioned before, we are talking about a very common complaint that people have about children especially, and that is the complaint of lazy behaviors, yeah? So I'm going to start with a poll, right? Just to get, a bit of activity, a bit of participation from all of you. I have two questions today. The first is laziness is most likely, right? And this is just a single choice, a character flaw because of emotional issues, because of bad learning attitude, because of a lack of purpose, or because the tasks are too hard, right? So if you had to make a choice, and obviously, you could, feel, different, there will be contribution from each of these factors. But if you had to pick one biggest contributor or biggest explainer, how would you describe it? And the question too is that a human brain naturally avoids thinking activities or engages in thinking activities, our natural state, right? Or you think it's neither, or you don't know, just put neither. Let me pull up the poll at this stage. There we go. If you can see the poll on your screen, so can I get some participation from the audience in Zoom with join us here? Right. Again, no right and wrong. It's just to kind of understand, the sentiments of the audience and sharing, of thoughts and experiences. So for those of you who are tuning in on Facebook, so we're just waiting a little bit, for some participation on our online poll right now, and we will be sharing the results in a little bit. So thank you. We've got about 50% participation already. Let's just wait a little bit more, yeah? We are about 40 seconds. So just maybe about 10, 20 more seconds, and then we will close the poll and look at the results. So thank you for your participation. All right, so so we've got about close to 70% now. Let's just end the poll and let's look at the results. Okay, so for the first question, most of our audience in Zoom, think that laziness is a result of a lack of purpose. Yeah, and I think that's something that we want to talk about as well. So character flaw, about 2% people think so. Emotional issues, 14%. Bad learning attitude, 17%. And obviously, we mentioned the lack of purpose comes in at 46%, and 20% thinks the tasks are too hard. Now, the second question, a typical human brain naturally avoids thinking activities. Now that's 26%. So only a quarter of the audience who participates, who participated think that it is that. And 61% thinks, the majority actually thinks that our natural state is to engage in thinking activities. And neither takes up about 13%. Okay, let's stop share. And talk about some of these questions, yeah? So the agenda for this evening or today is just two main points, broad points that I want to cover. The first is to understand laziness in the brain. You realize that we put a lot of kind of like, inverted commas, for laziness. This is not a word that, to be honest, that, I'm very comfortable in using on anyone, right? So it's quite negative, and I think I like to think of it as inertia, and I'll explain why, right? So, and of course, the second part is strategies to manage this behavior. So the first point, and 2% of our audience think that it is a character flaw, but laziness is not a character flaw, yeah? And we know that because if you have a child who might be lazy, or so it's like, do you have a brain that is just generally, sluggish, right? Not interested. That's not usually the case, because you might have a student, a learner who dislikes studying, right? Okay, so they complain, they're lazy when it comes to schoolwork, right? But if you change the task and say, let's go to the game arcade or go to the playground, they might be the most motivated and hardworking student, right, at the playground. So laziness is not a static character flaw, right? In the sense that it is just part of you, is your nature, right? And often we associate behaviors with kind of character traits. That's the way you are. I'm just not a people person, right? That's just the way I am, right? As if they are kind of fixed character traits. And laziness, some people think it is a fixed character trait. Not so many people in our audience, but I do know many people in the wider public do hold that view, right? But we do know, just because of behaviors, and you can see that the laziest and most unmotivated person in a task will become the most motivated person in another task, right? If the task is right. So it is task dependent. Therefore, it's not a static state. It really depends on what you are doing, what that individual is doing, right? Because for another person, studying may be very pleasurable, and going to the playground might not be pleasurable. It might be the complete opposite, right? And there are kids like that who do not enjoy physical activities. All right. So it is task dependent and also dependent on the individual. Now, let's look at the second point that we mentioned, an influence of emotions. Now, emotional issues can definitely be a contributor to disinterest, right? I mean, just imagine if you have a stomach ache, right? Or let's use a physical thing, right? If you have something that's bothering you, you can't be interested in something else, right? You have a bad tummy, all your concentration is on your discomfort. We should think of mental health kind of challenges like that, right? It's just not a physical ailment, but it is very consuming to the mind, right? If you're under stress, heavy stress, if you are down and depressed, I'm not just down, but really, depressed, or if you're anxious, how easy is it then to concentrate on something else and to be interested and exhibit enthusiasm? Yeah. So most likely, we switch off. So there is definitely a contributor, yeah, of the emotional state to behaviors that are not as interested or as motivated or productive, as we want. So that is something we need to consider. A bad learning attitude, with some in the audience who chose that as well. Now, remember, an attitude, I really would not think of it as a character flaw as well, because we sometimes do think like that, like, many behaviors, laziness, attitude, unmotivated. We think that, that person is like that. He's just not a book person. We make statements like that. So if you dig, we always talk about digging underneath the surface. When you see a behavior, right, it is symptomatic. Something is driving that behavior, right? So laziness is a behavior that demonstrates a lack of interest, but what's driving that lack of interest? So in the same way, a learning attitude that's negative, we put it in that category as well. Yeah, so we see these negative attitudes, right, that's coming out. The child is just, doesn't care about school, just not interested. But when you dig a bit deeper, and of course, there could be many considerations, bad experience, poor guidance, just bad school experience previously can create negativity. But assuming all is fine, right, just like a healthy child in a positive environment growing up, I think one of the biggest contributor in that situation where, we have supportive families and school systems, you then want to think about the mindset that the child has, yeah. And of course, we have talked. I'm sure everybody have heard of growth mindset and fixed mindset. If you're new to that, it just means that researchers have found two types of conversations that's happening in people's minds. The self-talk that is naturally going on. Some people have a set of conversations that's very positive. They call that the growth mindset, where you're certainly thinking of mistakes as, helping you to improve. Whereas another, set of conversations taking place in others' brains tell you that, no, you are who you are. If you can't do it, just too bad. You are not good. You're never going to make it, right? So if a person has those conversations that's constantly in their mind, and of course, it's in your mind, you believe it, you take them as facts. We often take our thoughts as facts. That's the other neuroscience discovery. We don't check them, and often they could be false. Yeah. So, and one of the false messaging is that our abilities are fixed. But you can imagine if a person has these fixed messages running through your head every day, how hard or easy is it to be enthusiastic, especially in an area that you might not be thriving in? It's really hard, because if whoever you are now is the way you are, there's not a lot of hope, right? And without hope, you don't want to work very hard. There's no point. Yeah. It's like, I am the way I am. What's the point? That's being smart, right? If you know that I'm just going to be hitting against a brick wall, why do I want to do that? So that can create attitudes. And again, this is just one of many reasons, right? I'm just able to point out, a few heavier points. And I'm assuming, with a lot of the audience here, you are, well-meaning parents and educators. So a lot of the children, would be under good care. So this would be something that you have to think about, somebody who's in a loving environment, supported, yet having this attitude, that's not very positive. Then you want to examine some of these conversations that might be happening in the child's mind. A fixed mindset creates a mental ceiling. So essentially that's that, right? If you have a ceiling, you don't want to try. You're there already, right? It kills motivation and it contributes to lazy behaviors, right? Just behaviors that you're not productive because you don't think you can go much further, right? So that stops you from trying hard and pushing yourself and working, right? Which are all, the anti-laziness kind of behaviors. Now, purpose. Most of our audience think that purpose is the issue, and certainly purpose is very important as well. The lack of a purpose or meaning, right, creates helplessness. Yeah, it's like, you don't know. What are you doing? There's no meaning, right? And then you're not productive. There's nothing that you're really anchored on. Yeah, and that's driving you because there is no goal, right? It's like a boat, drifting. Just there's no destination. Then is the boat going to be going at a fast speed? I don't think so, right? Because usually we have a destination, We have a plan. We want to get there at some point. And then we drive our boat there as fast as we can because there is a plan. When you don't have a plan, right? Or, there's no perceived plan, then you don't do much, right? Now, the other way, a purpose, I think, can be robbed. And we want to discuss this a little bit more when we talk about strategies, is the contribution of adults, right? Whatever a child or our learners, whatever they think, say, and do, does it really make any difference? Do they have power in their thought processes, right? So if I just give you examples, right? I mean, parent wants a child to pick up a musical instrument, child might not be interested, right? But, oh, this is good for you. And of course it is good for you. But, it might be perceived that it is forced upon, right? And if over time, these things are happening, then you might find that over time, the child behaves in a more and more undesirable way, right? In terms of kind of pushing themselves, right? Because purpose is such an important anchor, right? And purpose often has to come from within. And even if it wasn't there in the first place, and of course, babies are not born with purpose, but the adults got to help create that internal purpose, right? It's hard when, you're constantly doing something for someone else, right? I want to get good grades to make my parents happy. And of course, that could be a purpose. But I think the intrinsic purposes are really what drives the children far and wide. Yeah. So I think for purpose, it is definitely linked to the environment and something that I think we as adults need to look at. Are we helping the child create that internal purpose, right? Rather than that somebody is born, then you expect that, they develop that purpose. And of course, for some children, it's easier, right? They have a growth mindset. Their purpose is to learn, right? So it's kind of linked to that mindset as well, right? That there is kind of already a joy because your conversations tell you, oh, learning is fun. I know something that's new, right? So I think it's an interplay of what's internal and then what's happening externally, right? That's kind of like consolidating their thoughts, right? If the surrounding environment, allows them to, oh, you like to do this, nurture their interests and purpose in certain ways, then you find that becomes stronger and stronger and motivation grows, and productivity goes up as well. But conversely, the converse can happen as well. Now, the last point, the task is too hard, right? Now, at a very simple kind of cognitive skill level, which is the way we look at how we enjoy or not enjoy different tasks, right? This is probably a huge contributor, right? But you, of course, do need your purpose. You cannot have emotional issues that's kind of just overwhelming your mind. So it's numerous factors. But assuming we have a loving family, right, that's created great intrinsic purposes. We have strong positive mindset, from the child as well as from a very nurturing environment. Yeah, and we have a healthy, mental state. We still can have children who are not productive or not wanting to try or work hard. That's when this point becomes a real issue. So this can hit anyone, any family, as well-meaning as we might be, with all the positivity. If there is not a good match between your mental weights that you have to lift, in this case, is kind of like the big rock that you have to push and your muscles that's kind of pushing it, then I think we could have a behavioral or motivational issue. So, we look at this one a little bit more because it can really hit all of us, even if we are doing all the right things. And I know, in an audience like all of you, a lot of you come, well-meaning and providing very supportive environments. So let's use the physical state as an example because we can see our muscles. So I always like to compare our brains with that. So my question here is, who is likely to be lazy, right? The guy with the muscular guy on the left, or, the guy, the skinny guy who's kind of, groaning a little bit, of course, you would think that is the guy, that's struggling to lift a little weight, right? And just need to hold this out. Yep. And for the guy on the right, would we ever say that he has a character flaw if he doesn't like to lift? No, we will say that, hey, you got to build up that muscle. That's why it's hard for you, right? We are able to explain for them that, oh, your muscles need to be fitter, then this will be easier because we can see it. But because we cannot look inside the brain, but what's happening is very similar when we have lazy behaviors. It is this guy on the right side who's saying that I don't like gym. I don't like to lift the weights. I find it's not fun, right? And the other guy is having so much more pleasure. So unfortunately, because we are unable to visualize our children's mental muscles, right? Like the way we can our physical muscles, and the mental weights that's associated with all these different daily tasks, going to school, the homework, and all the other enrichment sports or, extracurricular activities that we want them to participate in, right? All these are mental weights that kids need to live. Yeah, I mean, okay, and we'll look a little bit more at that, right? So if you stay with me, so we have this idea that we have the mental fitness, right? And remember, right, that all of us has different sets of strengths and weaknesses in different muscles, right? But we do know for a fact that, if a child has stronger pathways, and we call them mental brain muscles, right, or cognitive skills, these are all kind of pointing to the same things. Skills that you have in the brain, yeah, helps you to think, process information, pay attention, yeah. Now, if they are strong, then many tasks could be easier. If they are weak, then the task could be harder, and that drives your motivation towards the task, right? And we have seen this. I often talk about an experiment, involving young babies in the lab, right? And these babies were given blocks to play with, and blocks is good for the math brain. So blocks is an educational toy. But at a tender age of 1 year old, they saw different babies were motivated towards the blocks in different ways. Some crawled away after a short time. Others continued to engage with the blocks. They touched them, they looked at them. So when scientists scanned the brains, they saw that the visualizing part of the brain was fitter in the babies who were more interested to engage with the blocks, right? Whereas the other group who were not interested, who couldn't make sense, couldn't draw a pleasure or fun from these toys, they crawled away. Yeah, so this mental state affects that behavior. And this is really, even with the growth mindset and emotions are healthy, and there is a purpose, right? We can still be knocked down, with a mental kind of state that's not fit. Now, remember that it doesn't mean that the brain, is unfit, then it's generally unfit, right? Like the physical example, you might have skinny muscles, right? You may not be bulky or strong, but you might be very flexible. You might be a good dancer, or you might be able to run long distances. Yeah. So so it depends on the parts of the brain that's supporting that task. For example, block play or math require the visual parts of the brain to work. Yeah. So you could have children who may not have the brain skills for effortless comprehension, for example. So they don't like to read, they don't like books, but the same child have the brain skills for advanced coordination in dancing, which is why we talk about laziness being task specific, right? It depends on the matching of the task and your mental fitness level, right? So if you have strong stamina, then you will find long distance running quite fun, yeah, because you can do it with effort, right? You can at least reach some form of some level of success. There can be pleasure, yeah, and so it depends on the activity and the muscles, the skills, the cognitive skills that are required to support, that particular activity. And if there's a good match, generally you find that a natural rhythm of, internal pleasure and motivation gets set up. And if, on the other hand, there's a mismatch, right? Especially the load is too heavy and the muscle has a hard time lifting. That's when you find that behaviors that you do not like, we all do not like, right? Not motivated, not showing interest or enthusiasm, they might kick in. All right, so that's kind of the time we have for discussion around kind of the basis of the brain in terms of how we are able to how it processes and creates these challenges and pushes us towards or away from different activities. Yeah. Now, the second question is interesting. I think a typical human brain naturally avoids thinking activities or engages in thinking activities or neither. So most of the audience think that, the natural typical state is that you engage in thinking activities. And that is not true. It's actually thinking is hard work, which is why so few people do it. This is quite a famous quote from Henry Ford. And it is now been supported by scientific research. Our brains tend to be lazy in that sense, all right? Our brain naturally avoids effortful activities. Why? Because it needs to conserve energy, right? It tries to conserve energy. And this is from evolution, right? Because energy should be given to survival. Once upon a time, we got to give to our muscles, we got to run away, escape, and survive, right? So, and the brain thinking itself consumes energy, right? We know that the brain takes up only 2% of our body mass, but consumes 20% of our carbohydrates, of the food, the fuel that we take, 20% goes into our brain. And thinking, mental activities take up energy. So our brain actually tries to avoid effortful thinking. Now, what is effortful thinking? So here we have to be refreshed a little bit with our different stages of thinking. So we often use the critical thinking kind of hierarchy that's proposed by, the Bloom's taxonomy of thinking skills, where you have kind of, I like to call it shallow or superficial and deep thinking, right? So you have different levels. So at a very low level, it's just remembering information, right? So you're memorizing your timetable. Is that highly effortful? I don't think so, right? It's just stick and, you're just pushing it into long-term memory, right? So it's kind of rote memorizing. So yes, rote memorizing has a place in learning, but that is, we do not want to rely on it because it's shallow. It's not deep thinking. Deep thinking is when you need to then be able to explain whatever you have remembered, right? You need to now answer questions. You need to apply. You need to take the information and use it in a new situation. So you have to understand, right? So you can memorize without understanding, right? But when you go into the deeper layer, and of course, we want our learners to go that way, right? You need to now apply the information and knowledge that you have acquired. You need to be able to break them down into parts, and see the different components that contribute to the idea. You need to be able to support and defend that idea, right? The reasons, your rationale behind it. So you're evaluating. And then you use all these to create new solutions, right? So these are all different depths. And as we go up higher, there's an increasing demand, especially on attention stamina and working memory. So therefore, your deep thinking is a lot more mentally effortful than kind of shallow thinking, which is why sometimes, right, we have students who will tackle, their studies through just short-term cramming, right? Just rote memorizing, right? I just look at the type of questions and the way I answer it. We've got kids who memorize essays, right? Because coming up with the beauty in language, it's harder, right? So we resorted to kind of memorizing that. Of course, it's not wrong if you're just considering that as a scaffold, right? Using some of the model sentences, phrases to then create your own, right? But if it is just memorizing them just to get the grade, then we are just using that level, right? It's easier, right? In a sense, all right. Of course, if we have to do a lot of it, then it's very short term. It comes and then it's gone. After the cramming session, after the exams, so it's not something that we encourage, especially in the future, right? With robots and AI taking over a lot of the lower level thinking activities, humans, we need to elevate, right? We should really be developing critical thinking and creative thinking. So that's why, a lot of the ministries of educations all over the world have put that as a central theme. Yeah. The world of the future, we need critical thinkers more than ever because simple task can totally be replaced, and robots do it better as well. Now, but it is hard. We need to acknowledge that, right? It's not a natural state that our brains like to go into because it takes more effort, more demands on working memory than kind of rote memorizing. And it has to pull all the connections together. And of course, your attention, stamina, long-term focus, it's not, it takes effort as well. Okay. And it's important to think about training deep thinking skills from young, right? And I often stress that because a lot of people think that young babies are not capable of deep thinking. I don't agree with that, right? Young brains are analyzing the brain, the environment in a massive way, right? Which is why they can go from 0 words to understanding language in 18 months, having the first 500 words or whatever, right? 50 words, yeah. So the process, right, of the habits that we go into, right, are developed young. So we encourage that, and this is just little children, at 2 years old, when a lot of people, you might still be doing single kind of vocabulary, remembering individual words. But what we encourage is really applying already the vocabulary, right? Just have a little video here. Okay.
Which child is reading a book? There is a boy wearing a star t-shirt. What is he holding? There is a boy wearing a star t-shirt. What is he holding? Okay, so where do you put? Do you place it on the shirt or on the back?
On the back.
Okay.
Yeah, that's really nice, right? So that's why we encourage reading, where you're really having lots of processing, where the children are applying, thinking about the single words vocabulary, right? Like rather than, just drilling a lot of vocabulary, but really thinking of applying, using the vocabulary. That's when you start to use working memory a lot more. There's a boy that's holding a toy, right? He has a star on his t-shirt. So you have all these different pieces of information. You're processing that. So it's actually not the t-shirt nor the star, right? It's the bear. The bear wasn't even mentioned, right, in the instructions. So that's problem solving. So that requires more demands for the brain, right? And but if we build it early, now remember, it is really the load and the muscle, right? If the muscles are fit, the load seems light. If the muscles not fit, the loads feels heavy. So it's an interplay. It's the same as going to the gym, right? If we have the muscles, right, liftings becomes more effortless, right? And if we have the flexibility, we can do more fancy moves, yeah. And conversely, if we don't, then we're less motivated. We are less inclined to try, yeah. Just because it takes a lot of effort, and we're not able to perform it well. Okay, so that's some of the discussions around what we know about laziness as a behavior from some of the research studies. And in this second part, I want to talk about strategies, right? So how can then, knowing what we know, manage this and push children towards more enthusiastic, more, kind of productive kind of behaviors. Yeah. So, and again, please feel free to put questions down in Q&A, because often the questions might come in very late and then we might not have the time to respond to them. So we do have a group of panelists. If you're in Zoom, joining us on Zoom, our panelists will help to address some of your questions as much as we can. But otherwise, yeah, whenever you have a question, that pops up, feel free to put it on Q&A. So let's look at strategies to reduce or manage, lazy behaviors. So again, we come back to this thinking. That's how I think about it when I see that, my child might not be interested in something. I think about the task, the load that it is creating, the mental effort that it's creating. And then I think about the strength that's needed to overcome that load. Yeah. So the discussion is really around two things: reduce mental load. Yeah. So make the mental demand more palatable, right? Or increase the brain strength. So there's two ways you can do the lifting. Not unlike going to the gym, right? You can choose a smaller weight and then you can be successful. And then with success, right, you have all the pleasure chemicals are being released, all right, the reward chemicals, and then that can drive you. So now the first thing I'm going to talk about is to really understand the individual's brain profile. This is actually a little bit of an extension from our last webinar. If you were here with us, we discussed learning styles. We talk about how every child is different in their strengths and weaknesses. So this is, I shared about my daughter Isabel's brain profile when she was 7. And so that's Isabel, you can see there. So when I profiled her, right, so we did different activities that look at her visual processing, her auditory processing, her focus, and a bunch of other things. But I'm just showing you, 3 clusters of scores here. But as a parent, then I know I almost am expecting lazy, uninterested behaviors here, because I see that, okay, these are the muscles that I'm dealing with. All right, vision is more around math, just in a very simplistic kind of way. We will be talking about the math brain in our next webinar, by the way. All right, and then auditory is more linked to language, and that I see a fit muscle, right? Of course, blue, the more blue and greens you have, the better. Orange and reds are not so good, right? So I'm already expecting it, because it helps me to manage, because I don't get upset. I'm almost thinking, if she suddenly loves math, I will be puzzled, right? Because I know her profile. It's like she's not flexible, right? I know she's going to not enjoy dance, that requires her to stretch that much. Or I know that her stamina is not great, right? I'm not going to have high expectations for running 1 kilometer, 2 kilometers, 3 kilometers, right? I have expectations, and that is already managing the process. Yeah, because we know that nagging and scolding doesn't work, right? It affects the relationship. So we're not just talking about driving the kids towards more positivity. I think it drives the kid towards more positivity when adults can understand and manage our own expectations first, right? And be calmer. So going into dealing with behaviors with open eyes, right? Of what I'm looking at. I'm looking at, attention has some weakness. So I'm thinking, okay, how long is she going to be working at a task? What am I going to be expecting, right? Versus another child who might have blues here, I would think differently, right? So I'm already managing myself. And of course, I think that is the beginning of the whole management process, right? So I think evaluating and having a clear understanding of a child, some of these mental states, right? It's very useful. And I use that in my own parenting. And so there are assessment tools. So at BrainFit, we offer a cognitive map. Is a 1 hour assessment that gives you a full profile in 5 of the core brain areas. So that's one thing I think is important. But then there are numerous things that are important. We talk about emotional issues. Now, I'm not doing justice to just have one slide and slap on the words, resolve emotional issues. I mean, this slide warrants and deserves a full hours of discussion, right? I mean, mental health issues are very, very real, more so than ever because of COVID, because of the distancing we have away from friends. We see half faces, the inability to connect in a deep way that we used to be able to, right? That is all stressful on the brain. Yeah, that's not easy. So, but we also need to acknowledge that if there is stress, if there is anxiety, if there is depression, it's very hard to be enthusiastic. It is the same as an ache in your head, anywhere in your body. It just consumes you, right? It is very hard to have focus. And I'm just using, again, the load, mental load, and the strength. When you have emotional concerns, your mental load is already higher. So now you are saying, I want you to also learn math and science and English and whatever. It's stressful for the system. The muscle, it is hard. Yeah, and I think we can all understand that, right? But of course, how do we resolve? If we need professional help, we seek professional help. A lot of talking, loving, spending time outdoors. And I think it's also challenging for the adults right now, for all of us, right? All of us are under stress. If you have a job, might be not secure. If you run a business like us, there might be huge insecurities, huge changes day after day, of different rules, different laws. It's very uncertain time. So the adult is struggling, and then of course the children are struggling. So it's not an easy time, I think, to be the most hardworking person, to be very honest. We all try, right? But I think we all need to give all of us some break as well, right? So the best things to do is calm down, have quiet moments, have me time, go outdoors, be in nature, all the healthy lifestyle kind of things, sleep well, get exercise, eat healthily, so all that things, I mean, just in 3 minutes, for me to talk about that. But yes, I think we will see, in one of the sessions where we really talk about, emotional kind of support, what other things can we think about? Yeah, but I just want to emphasize that if this is a central piece in a child's life, it is very difficult for them to, I think to expect that, for us to expect that they could be enthusiastic about other things. Yeah. Okay, now let's talk about mindset. Yeah, so many important things to talk about. We have to help our learners truly see that there is no mental ceiling. I think the growth mindset words are discussed a lot, which is wonderful, but I think sometimes it's just spoken, and there's no behavioral change, there's no real understanding. So I feel that it is really important. I mean, I almost think that in the future, the schools can even talk about how the brain really works, because the biology says that there is no mental ceiling, right? It's not a view of life. It's not a philosophy. It's a fact, right? It's a fact because of the way the brain works. So this is just sharing with you a resource that we have, right? We have emotional coaching. So growth mindset is one of the track, right? Where we spend about 15 weeks. Yeah. And this is just one of the videos, right? So it's some of the conversations I think we can be having with our learners, right? And so let's just watch a very short video.
Your brain is like a muscle. Does this mean you have real muscles like those on your arms and legs in your head? No, that's not how your brain works. Your brain is made up of billions of brain cells called neurons. Neurons are different from muscle cells, so you do not have muscles like those on your arms and legs in your head. Your brain is like a muscle because it can grow and strengthen with exercise, practice, and doing challenging things. How does a brain grow stronger? When you're doing something new or challenging, like solving difficult math questions or learning how to ride a bike, your neurons are busy trying to connect and talk to one another. At the beginning of doing a new or challenging task, the connections between your neurons are weak. This is the toughest time. When you are slow at the task, need to focus extra hard and put in a huge amount of effort. You may also make mistakes or fail during this period when your neurons have shaky connections. Most people do not like this phase because they get feelings that they are not good enough, or that the task is too difficult or dreadful. Many people have thoughts of quitting or giving up. They tell themselves there is no point in trying. What happens if you choose to give up? If you choose to give up, your neurons will stop connecting, and your brain can become weaker over time. What if you choose to press on even though you feel like quitting? If you choose to persevere, there is good news waiting for you. Over time, with repeated practice and exercise, the connections between your neurons will run faster and more steadily. When that happens, you will find the task to be easier and more interesting. A strong brain has many strongly connected neurons. It is these strong connections that make you smarter and more capable. Wait a minute. Can you actually become smarter and more capable? Absolutely. Remember, your brain is like a muscle. If you put in the effort and practice, you can definitely make it stronger, faster, and smarter.
Yeah, so I think if we are with our students, during some of the phases where they are really trying to master, it's a lot of, so imagine the load's heavy at that time because the muscles are being developed. So that's when you have a huge mismatch. And that's when a lot of that self-talk will tell you you can't do it, right? Give up, there's no point. So I think if parents are aware, right, and then we're able to support our children by even saying that, oh, you are in that phase. Something is hard, you know what? Your brain is being stretched. So I talk like that, with my children. Oh, are you going through that phase? Okay, you're going to hang in there, right? Let's do this together. How can we make it better? Right? It's hard. We know it's hard. Yeah. So you're looking at the process, right? But we're going to get there together, right? So can I help you? How can we, is there any strategy I can think of, right? To go through this phase. But once, you get it, then, you find that pleasure can come. And for them to, and each time that they're able to, get to that pleasurable state, from kind of struggling state, you have to kind of reinforce and see there is no ceiling. What is the next challenge you're going to take up? Something that we're shaky at, but we're going to work on it. Yeah. So help them to really see, and I think understanding the biology of the brain can be very helpful, because it's really not about a philosophy or a way of thinking, right? Let's just follow this movement. It's not. It is really factual kind of discoveries about how the brain works. And so therefore growth mindset is a factual a factual set of thoughts, whereas a fixed mindset is not accurate. Now, we want to talk about autonomy and purpose. Yeah. So a lot of the people in our audience think that it is important, and truly it is, right? And we're not going to underestimate that. After biological needs, having autonomy is the next most important psychological need, right? So children who engage in learning without external force or pressure are more motivated learners. So involve children in decision making. Do they really want to do something? Right? I have them have a say. Are you a controlling parent? Right? They must have a voice, because you don't want to get to the state where they think, is there a point in my voice, my thoughts, my actions? Because if they get to that state, then you have laziness to deal with, because motivation then goes down, right? So it's a lot of that, preserving that internal state of choice, right? Autonomy means having choices, right? Involving them in your decision about their lives, right? What do they really want to do or not, right? To empower them and keep, motivation and interest in life high. Purpose, it's kind of along the same vein, right? You have a free choice, you have the purpose. So children who fully understand the value of learning are more self-motivated. So that means that you really see that there is a pleasure and a joy. You're not learning because you want to get great scores to make your mother happy or to get that McDonald's meal, but you see it as part of the growth mindset, right? That, wow, I can stretch my brain. I can build a new skill. I can be great. I can go somewhere. I can set a goal and try and reach there, right? I think what we can do as a family, so the goals and autonomy is very much on the adults' plates, I feel, right? It's really the environment encouraging that purpose, or kind of diminishing that choice and purpose. So develop lifelong learning as a household value, right? So we're all learning together, and that we don't stop, because we don't have a ceiling, right? And mistakes are okay. Mistakes is opportunities for us to stretch the brains. Yeah, it's to highlight where we need to improve. Okay, so to have some of these common positive traits, and having the children have a say, right? Their voice must be heard, right? It might not be connected to laziness, but if they are not heard, they will not show enthusiasm. It wouldn't be suddenly that, it's all kind of linked, right? They need to know that they have an ability to control certain things. And I think that's when it's easier to have kind of enthusiastic behaviors. Break down tasks into small steps, right? Sometimes the goal seems very daunting. It's like you have this huge boulder. How am I going to lift, right? The task is so big. I don't have the mental muscles. Then you break it down. Okay, let's not lift this entire thing. Let's break it down into a small break. Can we do a small break? Yes, we can. Let's just do a small break. So that's when adults come in as well. So we break down tasks. We have to do this project. Okay, let's organize a little bit. Yeah, set up, little bite-sized projects, that make things more acceptable. Yeah, so the enthusiasm need not be crushed, just because of the sheer size, of the final goal. Build routines. Regular routines are very, very useful because the brain likes prediction. Not only that, it actually reduces the mental load because then you don't have to plan and organize. So there's inertia, there is mental resources going to, oh, where's my eraser? It's like, what time should I be doing this? Every thought is consuming energy. So if you're always doing things at the same time, if your place, your work there's always organized, you have structures, it helps to offload some of the mental load, right? And then you have more brain power to concentrate and focus on the important tasks. Yeah, so routines actually reduce the mental load. So it can improve your productivity, and the children can go further, right? Because with the same brain power, you now can focus more exclusively on the task. Train a brain, right? Train a fit brain. And so strengthen brain muscles. So you can strengthen brain muscles, following neuroscience, right? We lift mental weights, not unlike going to a physical gym. Yeah. So for example, our Brain Fit Scholar program, we do the 4-step test. Every brain is different. Then we tailor a personal workout based on your profile. Then we train the brain like a muscle. We lift the weights. If you need working memory, attention, stamina, depending on what you need, or speed, then we build those skills. Then we track, right? We track visible progress to show the child that your brain can really be stretched. It's just not a concept or a philosophy. You see it with your own eyes, and that's important to show them the reality of brain change, right? So again, coming back to the equation, reduce the mental load or increase your strength to carry some of the loads, yeah? So here you can see, this is kind of like our scholar exercises, physical training, mental training. So we have different apps, right? So this is working on eye speed or tracking, or you have your mindfulness, coaching. That is kind of within your within our emotional coaching kind of module. So these 3 methods, right, to really elevate the brain's performance, right, using physical exercises, mental exercises, emotional coaching to rewire, reorganize some of these conversations to elevate the strength of the brain muscles so that things can become less effortful. And by the way, we can do this all online. I know in many of the countries, you're still, working from home. And this was what we were just doing in my house, right? A couple of weeks back, right? Running some of these exercises. So you can see that, right? So training speed. You can see that for my daughter, we need a lot of visual kind of processing. So here's, core stability, planning. So you have the computer here, the coach is actually online, right? So you can still do physical training. Yeah, of course, with the apps for mental training, it's much easier, right? Because it's on the app. So if you have a gadget, you can work on that. So again, coming back to building the muscles, decreasing the load. Yeah. And then I have a quick summary, and then we'll take questions, right? So just to summarize, right, this quite a big topic, I think. Laziness is not a character flaw, but laziness can be a result of emotional issues, creating mental distractions, just increasing the load, the stress that the brain has to carry. A fixed mindset, creating false mental ceilings. You won't work hard when you know there's no point, right? You won't knock on a brick when you know it cannot be broken. Yeah, so the ceilings must be broken. I mean, it must be removed. A lack of purpose, right? If they feel that whatever I say or do, it doesn't change anything. They will not say or do anything, after a while. They give up, right? So purpose really important, and tasks may be too hard for our mental muscles. Yeah. So we need to think about all these. Now, and other thoughts, our brain is naturally lazy, so it avoids effortful tasks because it tries to conserve energy to try to help us to survive in the past. So critical or deep thinking is especially effortful for the brain because of the demand on attention stamina. You've got to stay on task for a stretched period, and working memory, all right, which is a system that demands mental effort, right? You can train these early though. So that's why, short-term rote memorizing might be easier than the longer-term learning and application. But in the longer future, where critical thinking is really what's needed more than everything, we got to be careful and, try and encourage that kind of, effortful thinking and understanding apart from just, kind of like acing the results. Then the strategies that we discussed, quite a few. Evaluating the learner's brain profile, that's more for the adults, to be able to know, okay, I'm already expecting laziness, but, in these areas, I can expect the child to thrive and be motivated. Resolve emotional issues, nurture a growth mindset, give autonomy, choices, right? Create purpose, break down big tasks into small steps, build routines, schedules, and structures, and train a fit brain, especially attention stamina and working memory. If we're talking about kind of effortful, the most demanding tasks, right? So those are kind of that's needed. All right, so before we take questions, sorry, I'm running a bit behind. And so here is a feedback form. So if you're interested to find out more about our profiling or our programs, informational sessions, you have the ability to sign up to our next webinar as well. So please use this link. I think we'll put it on the chat as well. And our next webinar will be about nurturing a solid math brain. Okay, so we'll be talking about how the brain learn math, and then how can we help our kids, learn math more successfully. All right, Ghazali, questions? I'll leave it like that.
I'm back. Okay, so we have a few questions. I think as the questions came in, I think you managed to answer most of them, but we'll just go through it again. There are some questions that overlap as well, so we'll see how it answers. So you were talking about intrinsic purpose to get the unmotivated child to start doing the work, right? So how can we encourage this intrinsic purpose? And because for parents and educators, you can't just wait for them to get motivated. You can't just rely on intrinsic. So what parents are asking what you can do to balance intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. What can we do to intervene so that we don't wait so long? Yeah.
Yes, no, I think that's a really, really a good point, right? I think you can use extrinsic, but I think we should use it in a very clever way. For example, right, we're trying to train, the brain muscles, right? We use extrinsic, we have a token system, right? Because the process is hard work, right? I think there are a few things. I think we first must recognize that the process is hard, right? And our reward must be very clearly. So it's not, I don't think it's a good motivator if you say that, I'm just going to give you a reward if you get 90% for the test, right? Right. But I think that the reward should be with the effort, so it's kind of like if you put in effort, and I can see that, right? I can see you sitting down and doing 2 papers, right? Whatever, right? I'm just already going to reward that. If there are mistakes, but you tried your hardest, you gave good behaviors, you tried your best, you reward that kind of behaviors using extrinsic, but you are developing that behaviors. Does it make sense? That behaviors that is going to convert over time into intrinsic. Now, let me share intrinsic motivation. At the end of the day, we are dealing with chemistry. Right? It's really about releasing dopamine, serotonin, right? The reward chemicals, the pleasure chemicals. When does pleasure come out? There's 2 important ingredients, and we already covered that. 2 things that gives humans pleasure. that's needed, right, when we talk about motivation. Number one is autonomy, that I chose to do it. I chose to, I want to, rather than I'm forced to do the task, right? And number two is competency, that I can actually be successful, right? So if these two, is kind of there, again, it comes back to the load issue, right? You're able to have the competency with a free choice. I chose to do that. And then you have that release of the positive chemicals. That chemicals go into and stimulate your pleasurable centers, right? Your pleasure centers. And then it drives you to come back to repeat that experience, right? So that's what we mean when we set up an intrinsic kind of like a motivation. So, if the child's not there yet, of course you can't wait, but then you need to say, let's break down the task. Where are you not mastering? Let's reward you if you will stick through this hard period, and really let's master the timetable. Let's do it together, right? And we're going to reward you because it's such hard work. Yeah. And I can see you putting in the work. So I think that's when external rewards could be used, right? But you don't use it as the purpose. You know what I mean? You use it to create intrinsic motivation, right? Rather than a dangle, just do well lah, then I give you this, right? Then you're not creating an internal kind of purpose, I think, and the joy. Yeah, I hope I explained that well enough.
So I hear you saying that the extrinsic motivator, extrinsic factor is the one that helps to build the intrinsic factor, but it wouldn't be the main cause. I think this pretty much answers that. There's really a lot of questions from parents and educators all over the world asking about how do you want to motivate the kids and how to really use these factors to help them.
Yes.
Look at them again. I think it's 9:32. Just to remind everyone, the next webinar's links is there. The feedback form is there. So as we talk, you can just help yourself to it.
If you have to leave, right? Because we try to stay on time, but I'm sorry, it's a big topic with a lot to cover, right? Yes, but I just want to reinforce, there is so many, which is why when we talk about the strategy, it's not a one solution that fits everything, right? So you need to know your child really well. You need to know what is he not motivated about. Math, why, which part of math, problem sums. Therefore, it might be the language part of math. Is it the understanding? Is it the modeling in Singapore? Is it the visual of the concept? So then you can find the match. Like, is it a concept? So for example, when my daughter makes an error, we label everything. So I will say, what kind of errors? So she knows because her attention is not great, she is very prone to careless errors. And we have a plan to work on carelessness, right? So there is a plan for a behavior, and the way we approach it is just building the muscles, right? And then, of course, Isabel tells me, it's hard, right? I got to do this, I got to exercise. Then that's when I think extrinsic can come in. Okay, I think it's very hard work. I just want to acknowledge your hard work. What can I do to make things better for you? I do use extrinsic, right? But not to replace, not to let it become the meaning. But if she was anxious about friendships, it's very hard to get to that state, it becomes distracted, right? I can't have those conversations anymore. I need to be checking in on her emotional state, right? I mean, is there things that I need to deal with first, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not unfortunately, one button, do one thing, and then it's all, going to be well. We are dealing with human behaviors, right? And it's complex. There's so many pieces, but that's why we try to lay out the pieces and look at each one, right? And look at the kind of conversations your kid's having in the head. Is the child having healthy conversations? So there are many, many pieces, but they all push into the one behavior. I can tell you it works. I mean, I can be honest with you. I don't quite have a lazy behavior that I deal with in my children. Right? I don't deal with this. I have other issues, right? But laziness is not one of them. But I can tell you that I deliberately cultivate that, and I use every single one of my strategies that I have shared with you. At dinner, I create purpose by having conversations. I have deliberate conversations that's going to let her know that she makes decisions for her life. Even though I have a say, I want to have a say, but I craft it in a way that empowers her, and I consider her opinion closely. I discuss with her why I agree or not agree. All the times go into that. So it's so many pieces, but if you work on each one of them, you don't have such a problem. I can tell you that, right? But you may have callousness, you may have muscle issues. Yeah, sorry, but it is not easy. But but we need to look at everyone, and every single one of them, I think, can contribute and will contribute if it is an issue. Sorry,
Right.
long answer. Chop chop.
Because I think like almost half of the questions here is just depending on where it's from, either from educators or parents. I think they really have to find out why the child is not interested and seems lazy. But once you know that, I think the techniques or the ways to work towards the intrinsic factor would be different. It's not one size fits all, right?
Yes, and remember, the brains need rest as well. So for example, right, I mean, we have this module on willpower, right? So I have, I decide when my child has TV and not, right? But, so I have conversations, like Isabel comes back from school, for example, right? She'll have lunch and it's already late, but she really wants to watch the TV. Right. And so we struggle a little bit with that. Right. So it is, so I have kind of like the ideal, right? And then she has what she wants. And she will tell me, look, when I come back from school, I have no willpower. This is the kind of conversations that I have. And I tell her, you're right, Isabel, you're right. She is right. So you also have to know at what time of the day are we dealing with? Have you spent already 4 hours working? And, actually some research has shown that our work for deep thinking is capable of only about 4 to 5 hours. Deep thinking. Of course, school hours are long, but a lot of the school hours are social, everything else, which are also important. I'm talking about hard work. If your child has spent half a day in tuition and you expect them to be enthusiastic about homework, then I think you have then your understanding of the brain, you need to give it some slack. It is, an organ that will deplete in energy. So could it be that, right? When are you kind of seeing this kind of behavior? But the key concepts are there. The brain consumes lots of energy. It needs to rest, right? Therefore, we need to kind of have the routines. We do a lot of these things to minimize, the extra effort that the brain has to take. So that's why it is not a silver bullet. It's a whole lifestyle of understanding the brain and then managing that, right? And that's how I see it.
Great. Okay, it's 9:37.
Yeah, we probably have to end. Maybe join us on Clubhouse next week. We'll continue this conversation. Laziness is a big topic. Yeah, I know. And it's hard. I think it's harder with kids at home as well. I think and we have to give them more leeway. The brain has to work harder in a home setting when they're studying. That's true, right? So we need to recognize that as well. But yes, let's end, Ghazali. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. We've come to the end of the webinar. We'll keep the webinar open for another maybe 1 minute or so that everyone can access the feedback form, which is on the chat. So there's a link to the next webinar and the feedback form as well. You can continue to fill up the form when the webinar has ended. And yeah, if you have any questions, you can just join us over in our Clubhouse, right?
Yes. Actually, I see a question. I might just kind of talk about that, right? I mean, the first question, I'm just looking at the Q&A right now. So if the task is simple, right, but the child doesn't want to do it, right, you have a lot of other considerations. I would think more of an autonomy thing, if you ask me, right? I want to have it my way. Is that where they can push? I mean, sometimes when there are very few things that they can push, they push where they can to preserve that autonomy. Right. So I think there's another consideration. I'm not saying that will be it. You might be a parent that gives a lot of autonomy, but there's one thing, that I choose not to do it. I just don't want to do it. Right. It's that exercise and it's preserving themselves. It's not a bad thing in that sense. Right. So of course, then my strategy would be then you give them options everywhere else. They don't have to fight this battle. If it is not a battle thing, then I think in that situation, you can use an extrinsic kind of like motivator, finish everything, you can get a nice reward, right? Kind of, yeah. Sorry, quick one. But we're finished.
But yes, so it's 9:40. Sorry for the wait.
Are we still typing any answers? Are we just going to leave them?
Let me double check. Anyone? Is there any questions still being typed out, guys? If not, then yep. We'll see you to the next webinar. Thank you
Yes.
for coming. Yeah?
Shirley, you okay? Is Shirley typing anything? No. Okay.
Done with that. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry,
Thank
too many
you.
questions. Yeah. We have a Q&A on Clubhouse next week. All these questions that we don't get. So join us on Clubhouse. It's open to Android now, I think. And try and get some of these more discussion, right? Okay. Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys. Bye-bye. We will end this webinar right now.